this is my basement where a lot of experiences have happened.
And you grew up here in your mother's home.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you live here for?
Over 10 years.
So you've had a number of extraordinary experiences. Can you tell me the kinds of things you've seen and felt here?
Well, I've always sort of felt something not necessarily so good ever since we moved here, I guess. Things from seeing things, my bed would always shake. I had one experience in the bathroom when I was in the bathroom and I had shut and locked the door behind me just out of habit. And something ran against the door and it flew open. My parents were upstairs so they couldn't hear me screaming or yelling for help because there was obviously nobody else down here. I finally was able to make it to the bottom of the stairs and they came down and we couldn't find any explanation for what had happened. There's always just sort of been a presence and it hasn't necessarily ever felt good to me.
And those kinds of things have only happened here in this house?
Yeah, things like that, yeah.
How do you feel being back in this area right now? What are you experiencing at this point?
I feel okay right now just because there's other people around. It depends. Like if I'm the only one in the basement, I pretty much don't come down here if I'm by myself.
I've done some intuitive work in the house, and I come in and I try to pay attention to the energies of the space, and I use a process that I call free writing, where I essentially sit with a notebook and just listen. Mm-hmm. I listen to what my mind is sensing, what I'm feeling, and I pay attention to the energy. I'll be honest, when I first came into the space, I didn't get a lot. It felt very silent. It didn't feel like there was much going on until I crossed through the threshold of that room and I moved into the red room, and you could feel a shift in the energy, which might be tied to the difference in color. We moved from blue to red. It definitely has a vibe just because of the color of the space.
Right.
But there's something there. And at that point, it was communicated to me this idea of a steering wheel and like the turning of a steering wheel. So it feels like there's some connection to some either a motor vehicle or a steering wheel, an artifact of some sort that was maybe moved from the house at some point or brought into the house, but there's some affinity for this object. And this idea of a fist, and when I saw the picture of the fist in my mind, I heard them say that they weren't responsible for everything, that they weren't responsible for the fist, whatever that would be. Does anything there make any sort of sense to you?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I had a friend, he lived a couple doors down, and he had come over one night, and we were just hanging out, and he ended up staying the night, and he was on one couch, and I was on the other, and maybe after about 15 minutes, he started screaming and saying, "Oh my God, something punched me in the face, like, turn on the lights, turn on the lights."
Wow.
And I turned on the lights, and sure enough, he was bleeding everywhere and holding his nose.
Well, whoever's here is telling me that they weren't responsible for that they weren't necessarily the ones who, did a lot of the activity. So I don't know if that's them kind of throwing their hands up saying, hey, we're not fully responsible for everything that this family is feeling. There's something else here, or if there's another source for the activity that's happening. But that's kind of the impression that I got. There was also this idea of not being afraid. They don't want to scare anybody, but it sounds like you have felt fear because of this presence for a very long time.
Yeah, a very long time. Yeah.
So the question I have is why do you feel that maybe you have been sort of targeted? Because that's how it sounds to me. It sounds like most of the manifestations that have happened with Robyn as the center point. Any idea as to why?
I don't know. Ever since I was a kid, even before we lived here, I guess I've always sort of been sensitive to those things and noticed or felt spirits around me, I guess. And so maybe that's why they figured that I'm open to those things, so they try to communicate, I guess.
I'd be very interested if you're willing to join us in our investigation tonight. That sensitivity that you have, that you say you can sort of feel and see them, I'd like to open that up a little bit more and maybe utilize your skill set and utilize you almost like a conduit so that you can help us to maybe confirm some of the information or to get an identity attached to the spirit that's here, but only if that's something you're comfortable with doing. Does that sound like something?
Yeah, okay. I think I can give that a try.